The Gentleman Style Show.
Welcome to the next episode of the Gentleman Style Show. I'm Baldwin.
And I'm Creech. And today we've got a majestic type of guest. We've never had one of them.
A majestic type of guest.
I know, I like
That's the best word you can use.
Yeah, I like to use some different, eclectic type words. Sometimes.
Your vocabulary is outstanding.
I think. But anyway, But really, we have a guest today. She is not only running for an office, but she is about the people, trying to make sure the people have something.
Right.
Trying to make sure that they understand the law,
right.
About the law.
Exactly.
Get treated correctly by the law.
And more importantly, she's about our kids.
That too.
Sometimes our kids, they get left behind. Some people think some ways about the juvenile justice system. Some people think other ways about the juvenile justice system. But we're about to get some clarity and some more information because a lot of people probably don't understand what's going on in the background. So,
yeah, and then because she gets to tell us about the whole background of Denver, Colorado. That's always intriguing to me.
I don't know how deep we're going to go into Denver, Colorado.
But we're not there. But go ahead.
Anyway, right. Let's welcome our next guest to the Gentleman of Style Show, Judge Deitra Butler.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Good to be seen, right?
I know that is right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Judge Butler. First of all, let's give everybody a little bit of background. We, with you having the title judge, we know you have a background in law, but let's kind of go back before the law came into place. Give us a little background on where you're from and how your upbringing came about.
Okay, so I am from Denver, Colorado. I'm a single child, my mother's only child, raised by my mother, who was a single mother. I was educated in the public school system there in Colorado. Had an awesome upbringing. My mother was amazing. She was able to expose me to several different things that I don't think that I see. Kids of today don't necessarily get those exposures to different things outside of their normal realm, I guess. And so that exposure that she gave me opened up in me a desire to see more, to do more, to have more. And so I was able to incorporate that into my life. I ultimately moved here to Atlanta, to the Atlanta area. I was married. I married my son's father. I have one child. But I similarly raised him to expose him to a lot of different things, right? So that he's not just all video games and rap music, although he would make you think he is. That is not how he was brought up, right? So he was a product of Christian schools here in Georgia. He played football. He is now in his fourth year of college. He was a pre-med major, but I'm told he changed his major. And so I've been told that by him. We haven't discussed it, but I don't know that I actually get a vote. But he is looking to change his major. He's more interested in real estate than medicine, he said. And he's interested in an MBA. So he's in his fourth year. I don't necessarily call him a senior because I know this isn't the last year.
Right. So being from Denver, Colorado, and we haven't been exposed to Denver, Colorado like that. So we're using you. Was that like a low class, middle class, higher class upbringing?
We were definitely middle class upbringing.
Okay.
My mother, like I said, she was a single mom, and at times she would work 3 jobs to support me and herself, obviously. But until I became an adult, I didn't understand that there was a difference. I wasn't raised to believe that there were the haves and the have-nots, so to speak. And even though my classmates were of various backgrounds, I felt like I was a competitor, right? So I was always an overachiever, and I wanted to win. I still want to win. And so I competed well. So I graduated at the top of my class from high school and from college, and not at the top of my class in law school. But I was not very athletic. I was not, but I did run track. I got cut from the volleyball team. And I know you like, how did that happen? But trust me, it does. I know. Isn't it terrible? And they told us, I went out for volleyball because I wanted a letter. And they said, nobody gets cut from volleyball.
And you got cut.
Me and my best friend got cut. We were horrible. I realize that now.
Or were y'all just conversating a whole lot?
No, we were horrible. Yeah, we hitting balls up in the ceiling of the gym. No, we were horrible. But so I did run track. I did okay in track. But I'm not really athletic. So I was more academic and focused. And so
at what point did you realize the financial differences? What was there, like some pivotal, what, how do you say that? Pivotal, yeah.
Moment.
Pivotal point in your life that happened? Are you able to give us an example when you actually realized that?
When it came time to start applying for colleges, and where a lot of my peers and colleagues, because the district I was in, you know, so they were busing in Colorado, and they were busing you. Like, I went to school in Southeast Denver, but I lived in Northeast Denver. So the integration.
How long was the ride? Was it?
You know what? I don't know, because I was on the bus talking. But it's maybe 45 minutes or so. But if it snowed, then it was like, because we didn't stop anything for snow. The buses may not run, but you still had to get your kids to school. School was still open. So 30, maybe 45 minutes to get to the southeast side back then. But they were upper class, right? So they were just applying to colleges, and if they got accepted, there was no issue with where's that money going to come from. Where I was looking for scholarships and you know, application fee waivers and those kind of things, those were not issues. I realized it a little bit then, but I had a ton of scholarships, and so it wasn't as obvious until law school. And then at that point, the scholarships covered a portion, but not all of it. And so that's when I realized that my mother was doing some other things to make sure that I was able to realize my dreams.
Right. So what was, is Denver, like, is it diverse? Are we represented in Denver, Colorado in a fashion, or what was that like?
We're represented now, right? Because Denver was one of the first, Colorado was one of the first states to pass, to legalize marijuana. So we're much more represented now. It was not very diverse. Like, in my law school class, there were 33 total black people in the school, right? In all three levels. There were 33 of us.
What was that school's population? Like, around what? You don't have to be exact.
More than 200.
Okay.
2 or 300, because I went to University of Denver, so it was a pretty big class. Because now it had to be more than 200, because in my classes, there were probably 100 students, and so you may have another black person in your particular session with you, or two, but not nearly what you see here in the Metro Atlanta area. Nothing like that, because when I did move, I was wowed to see the number of successful black people that I did.
Shocking.
It was absolutely shocking to see them in leadership positions, to see them in power positions, the mayors, heads of corporations, you know, running their own businesses, lawyers, like everything. That to me was amazing, right? Because like we had some, but they just weren't as plentiful.
Was that what drew you back to the Atlanta area?
No, my husband drew me back to the Atlanta area, yes.
Is that how you got to Clayton County?
That's how I got to Atlanta, period. Because I born and raised in Colorado. My mother is originally from South Georgia. So I visited here every year. She would come home, and I would, of course, be with her. But once in my very last year of law school, I met my husband. My husband, well, I'm going to call him
Well,
husband.
the only reason I say that is because when people say, hey, I'm going to move to Atlanta and everything, they don't say, man, I think I'm going to move to Clayton County. You know?
But, you know, so I didn't, I came down with him, and believe it or not, when we drove down, it just happened to be Freaknik. Now, I never knew anything about Freaknik.
That's when you came down?
That we drove down on that weekend.
While it was going on?
While it was going on. So when we drove, because I drove with him, he had been in Colorado working, building our new airport, and I came down with him to find an apartment because I hadn't yet
Not to
graduated.
go to Freaknik.
Not to go to, I had no idea what Freaknik even was.
Okay, go on.
And but we got on 75, got on the connector, and literally traffic just stopped, and people were out of the cars and they were on their cars, and I was like, what happened? Like, I'm thinking it was an accident. He was like, oh, it's Freaknik.
That was
So
we were
he
out
knew
there.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
you
he-
were-
Yeah, because he's from here.
Okay. Yeah, we
Yes,
know
yes,
about
yes.
it.
So he
You
knew.
were out there, so-
Yeah, you were part of that.
Yeah, I will not be on the video unless you see me like this. So I came down to find an apartment, and so there were a couple that I looked at, did not have work yet, but I had a healthy savings, and so I was like, I'll be okay for a few months while I can find a job. Knew I was graduating law school, and I thought, hey, I'm going to be a black lawyer, so I'm going to be a prized possession. Not so much because it's Atlanta. It was not Colorado, right? And so I found the first place I moved was an apartment in Alpha Boulevard. And it was nice, though. It was nice. It was comfortable. Clayton County I think gets a bad rep,
I think so too.
and I think that it's unfair to our population. I think some of it is intentional, but it is definitely unfair. I have lived in Clayton County. I don't want to say numbers because people might guess my age, and I pretend like I'm a lot younger. But
When you say you think that it's intentional,
I think that what you see on the media is fed to you in such a way that Clayton County is portrayed as a haven of crime, and that's not what we are.
right? It's not.
That is not what we are. There are great things happening in Clayton County. Our school system is doing amazing things.
And there's a lot of
Some of our organization development is growing, constantly growing. We can't even house all the people who want to be here. But that's not what you see, right? So,
The
Marta
other part of that question, sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
The other part of that question, when you say it's intentional, I'm thinking intentional to the point to where they want to keep people out. Is that what it is?
I don't know. No. I
Or
think that
in?
I think that we are portrayed as less than, as like a bottom by the media. I think Clayton County, as the county, we want people, right? We want growth. We want entertainment. We want restaurants. We want, all of those things, right? If you look at our leadership, it's primarily African American leadership, and we are capable. But if you watch certain things, it will seem as if we're not capable, because they portray us as inept.
Right.
They portray us as unable to govern properly, unable to keep our citizens safe, unable to care for our children, unable to maintain health care, all of those things. And so then larger corporations or more things that you may be more attracted to, they kind of stay away, right? Because they've been fed a story that this place is just racked with crime.
Okay, so what we're saying is this is not coming from
In
internal
Clayton. No.
this
I'm
is
saying
coming
media,
from-
yeah, from external sources, right?
Okay.
So if you watch the news, there could be 1,000 things going on in Fulton County
Right.
or Buckhead,
Right.
and there could be one negative thing that happened here in Clayton County. But what you will see 3 or 4 times on that show is what happened in Clayton County, and they'll brush by those other things
Right.
if you hear them at all.
Right.
But you're going to hear constantly that one thing that happened in Clayton County.
Right.
So I think that the portrayal, the image that's put out of Clayton County is not fair, one, and it's not proper.
I'm glad you said that because I used to live in Ellenwood, and I've lived like downtown prior to that, and been in Clayton County for like 6 years, a little over 6 years, and I used to hear the same rumors. So it's hood crime and all this and that. And I'm over here, I'm like, I ain't
Quiet,
had a problem since I've
and it's
been here.
quiet,
What are you
right?
talking
Comfortable,
about?
yes,
So
yes. Like I am peaceful when I'm at home. Like it's quiet. Holidays, people are gonna have their family over, those kind of things, and I'm gonna have mine too. Excuse
Judge,
me.
Plus, when it's ice on the north side of Atlanta, it's no ice over
Yeah,
here.
we're just wet.
good.
Yeah, we're just wet. Yeah, if that.
So what are they
So we're
talking
still at
about?
the grocery store. We're out doing whatever we're doing.
Right.
So I feel that the image of us is inaccurate, and I don't like that narrative. Right, that narrative needs to change.
Designs by Rona the Stone.
Raised by Baldwin Creature Brand.
Available at baldwincreech.com.
Let's step back just a little bit. So once you get to Atlanta, you find your position, so you start practicing law. How does it move towards you becoming a judge? So what was that journey like to get to that first appointment?
Okay, so when I first began practicing, excuse me, when I first began practicing, I was married but no children. And so I was a general practice, and wherever a case came up in Georgia, I would go. It could be in North Georgia, it could be in extreme South Georgia, I could spend the night, I could do whatever. Once I had my son, I no longer wanted to travel. I wanted to be at home with him. He was born early, and I just wasn't going to leave my child. So he couldn't go to daycare, like a whole lot of things. And so I wanted to be with my child. So I took a job in the solicitor's office in Clayton County. So I became a prosecutor. And I prosecuted in the solicitor's office for just over 6 months. And then in July the following year, I became an assistant district attorney, but I asked specifically to go to juvenile court. While I was in private practice, I did do a lot of juvenile court work. I did like GAL work, I did parent attorney work, child attorney work in the juvenile court, and that was where my heart was. Like, you can tell when you're where you're supposed to be, and immediately I knew that's where I was supposed to be. So when I went to the DA's office, I told at that point, the district attorney was Bob Keller. I told him I want to come, but only if I can be in juvenile court. And I did that because I felt like I could make a difference, because it has always seemed to me that Black and brown children are penalized more harshly than other children. As a prosecutor, I felt that I would have some control over the penalty, right? Those recommendations on which charges are brought, which cases, what services, those kind of things. I had a vote in those things. So I worked in the DA's office in juvenile court from 2003 to 2009. In 2009, I was appointed to the bench in juvenile court. And then from 2009 until July of last year, I was a juvenile court judge here in Clayton County. But the programs, and so that gave me an opportunity from the bench and from the prosecution table and from the defense table as well, to kind of normalize or to kind of equalize the treatment, right? So there's a disproportionate impact in our communities for lots of things. But when that happens to children, it's patently unfair because they don't get a vote in anything else that's happening, right? So adults, we vote, or we should, and we kind of have a voice through our vote of what happens and who governs and how that happens. But children don't get to vote. So then what happens to them is totally in the hands of the adults around them or the adults in charge of them. And so if those adults are not responsible or not knowledgeable, right? Because the people perish because they lack knowledge. If they're not knowledgeable because they don't know to ask, or they don't know certain things are occurring unless it's occurring specifically to them, right?
Yeah, let me touch on that for a moment. I read an article that I believe you authored it, where you talked about the lack of education for different levels of judgeship.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound about right?
That's absolutely right.
Towards continuing education and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Can you speak on that for a little bit?
Okay, so juvenile court judges are appointed by superior court judges. Mm-hmm. And as part of our continuing judicial education requirements, we have to take certain classes because juvenile court judges also sit as superior court judges at times. Mm-hmm. So in order to do that...
Is that a requirement, or is that just a courtesy?
So I'm going to just bounce a question back to you. If your boss says, let's pretend you have a boss, and your boss says, hey, I need you to record this program because I have something else to do. and then you do it. Is that a courtesy or is that a requirement?
That sounds like courtesy.
It's a courtesy for you? What happens if you say no?
I'm probably going to be looked upon negatively next time something needs to get done.
So is it a courtesy or a requirement?
It sounds like a requirement.
So it's whatever you name it, right? But that's how that happens. But in order to be able to hear those cases, you have to then also take their continuing judicial education courses. There is never a time when, in most circuits, when the Superior Court judge comes and sits in juvenile court, because that's what they appoint the juvenile court judge to do.
Okay.
Some circuits here in Georgia, the Superior Court judge does sit as a juvenile court judge, but in those smaller circuits where, where they really only have like one or not a whole lot of cases going on in either Superior or juvenile court. So some of the smaller counties, they may have that Superior Court judge will sit as both. He'll do part-time. But for most of the juvenile court judges, they will hear Superior Court cases. They hear it on a rotation. But the Superior Court judge who requires you to come and do those things, they never take the juvenile court requirements. So unless a juvenile court judge has ascended to Superior Court, that bench is largely, for lack of a better word, ignorant as to the fact of what the purpose and the roles and what occurs in juvenile court, right?
That seems like just malignant to a degree, because I mean, how can you be accurate in your decisions if you don't know what's going on? I mean, how does that even make it into that profession? I mean, how does that work? I mean, where does that come from? Tell me that. From
the legislature, because that's how our scheme is written. That is not how most schemes are written in this country, but that is how the legislative scheme is written in the Georgia Code. That Superior Court judges appoint, but they don't have to sit, right? So if you don't have to sit, you don't need to know that.
Right.
But what I think a lot of them don't understand is that when you take the juvenile court judge out of juvenile court, you also take them away from what they are appointed to do. Then you take services away from whatever their caseload is. Because if I have time to focus on just this case, then I can give you a better outcome. And I can devise other services. I can, bring in programs that will service these children and then will render a better result as they get older, so that they don't end up in the adult system, that they don't end up in a cage for the rest of their lives. See, I'm of the opinion that children don't belong in cages. I think that children, because if you raise a child, now I just think it's really significant. If you put a child in a cage, people call it jail, but it's a cage, right? You put a child in a cage at a young age, while that brain is still being developed, while certain tendencies are still being developed in that child, because we know that the brain is not fully formed until the late 20s. Some studies now say 30, they keep raising that number. Then what's ingrained into that child at a formative age is survival of the fittest, which is what is happening in most prisons, right? You got to fight for your food. You got to fight for a lot of things, right? And children are ill-equipped maturity-wise to deal with the myriad of things that come at them in a detention center. And you're taking children 9 times out of 10, very, very few times where you see children who, can't say never, but children who have parents who have taken the time to pour into that child properly, so that they, are given certain tools or given certain opportunities. The time that you'll see them in a detention center is very few, but you're taking children who already come from a place of lack. And it could be lack of, if I as a mother am worried about whether or not my child is going to have a roof over his head or food on his table or clothes on his back, I don't have time to worry about you getting your homework done. I don't have time to read to you. I don't have time to take you to the opera. I don't have time to take you, to certain parks or to, on a boat ride. I don't have time to do that.
And this is where the development programs come in order to curb
some of that lack, right? To be able to equip our community, our parents, our families with what they need to give these children a great start in life.
Right.
So when we're talking about these development programs, are we talking specifically for the kids, or are some of these programs for the parents as well?
For parents as well, right? Because kids don't do anything without their parents. Juveniles don't sign contracts or rent apartments or provide for themselves. You know what I mean? So parents have to be equipped. So if I, as a parent, was taught, like, how many times have you heard, well, that's what my mom did to me and I turned out all right. Right? So you do what you know how to do. So we have to then give the parents proper tools as well. And so,
So we're talking about a broad spectrum to tackle the problem, not just one-dimensionally, just going for the kids. We're talking about whoever's involved. It could be multiple people. It could be an extension of the family.
it absolutely is an
Whatever needs to
extension
be
of the
done,
family.
Whatever needs to be done, you're putting things in place in order to, because you've seen it. You've seen it. You
For
have
years.
Over what?
A lot of years. I was an infant. I was a baby
You
myself.
had 14, then you had 10, right? I believe. So was that 24?
Yes, and I was definitely in diapers. Yes. But a lot of years, right? So if you look at things like the Child Wellbeing Index, and it'll tell you how children do in a particular community.
Right.
Well, Clayton County traditionally is not scoring well on that index because we don't have basic services. We are not meeting basic needs. And so, like recreation centers, access to health care, livable wage employment, like healthy food options, an educated, a well-educated population, an overwhelming educated population, right? There are grants.
Okay.
There are programs, and so who puts that out? Is it United Way? The people who put out these indexes, they will guide you to grants, but you got to find those grants and those programs, and you got to bring them in. So just before my departure from juvenile court, we had my director and I had identified some awesome programs for the kids, because what we came to understand is, no matter how many times I tell Johnny, you got to stop doing this because I'm gonna have to detain you. If Johnny is hungry, or if Johnny's siblings are hungry, Johnny's gonna go rob somebody to get some money to feed himself and to feed his children. So we partnered with technical schools. We partnered with Atlanta Metro. We partnered with certain music producers, because everybody wants to be an athlete or a musician. So we were able to get a well-known producer to sign on, and we were in talks with some streaming services to allow our children, our juveniles, to intern, but to receive money for those services. And at the same time, that would be their community service to us, and that would teach them skills, life skills, right? And then we get a stronger workforce here in Clayton County, and we keep those kids out of cages. But then I was removed, and so none of that came to fruition. All of those things went away.
So I have a question for you regarding, we talked a little bit about development, right? So in terms of developing the parents, what type of programs, because what I view, or what I've seen a lot of, is you have young people having kids. They probably weren't ready to have kids, but at this point they're parents. But they're still, as you said, mentally, brain-wise, they're not developed to the level that they have. So are there programs where because some of these young parents decide, yeah, I had a kid, but I'm not doing what I'm doing in the streets. I'm not doing my thing. So are there programs that you guys are developing to try to teach them, the things that they need to know to keep these kids out of juvenile?
So the issue then becomes, so in order for a person to access any service in juvenile court, they'd have to come into the system, right? And so yes, there are parenting classes, there are budgeting classes that they get, nutrition class, there are all those things to teach them, but that's after they've come into the system. That means something had to happen to bring you here. Ideally, we would have access to those programs before court, before you are, before your child is removed for whatever neglectful reason, or before your child has been physically abused or, other abuses that they could suffer. So if we could, in a wider community, then engage those programs for people, say at Southern Regional, which I don't even know if that's still the name of the hospital out here in Clayton County. But if at the time that contact is made with those young mothers, if we could then give them access to those programs, and it would be on a voluntary basis, but there would have to be some funding, right? Because a lot of people don't have the means to afford to, to pay for certain classes, whether they would like them or not, right? So if we could get the funding, grant funding, or other sources, because with this funding, then we can keep children out of care. And we can keep children safely at home, because the trauma that comes from removing a child especially at a young age, that's lifelong trauma. And oftentimes we don't have the ability to articulate. So you'll see then that child misbehaving later on in school, or the child, will get into, certain mischievous activities in the community. And that is because the mother or father or both lacked the skills necessary to kind of train that child up in the way that he should go. So if we could get those programs in the community, it would do a couple of things. It would save the children, right? The trauma of being removed, and keep that family intact. And it would also increase the child well-being index in the community as a whole, which then leads into other federal dollars just coming into the community, and then other things, right? So other programs. And so the reason that you see more, the circus comes, and, more museums, or, the zoo and other things in Atlanta, because they have those programs and those dollars, and outside of court requirements. Because you'll do, if it's done as part of a court requirement, you may do what you need to do to be able to get your child back, or to get off of probation, or whatever that case may be. But you don't really internalize those skills. It's a means to an end. I want my baby back, so I'm going to complete this program. And then when I'm done with that program, I'm done with that program, as opposed to employing those skills into your everyday life.
Right.
As a judge now, do you have the power? So I'm a young parent, my child is always getting in trouble, and I just don't seem to care. So I probably, in theory, I should be on a first name basis with you, because I see you, 4 or 5 times a year, every year for that same child. So do you have the power to mandate them to go to certain classes? And if they don't, of course, the child's already moved, but even if they don't go to class, do you have the power to mandate something harsher or more severe just for them, out of neglect for what they should be doing as a parent?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do in juvenile court requires the parent participation, because the parent is responsible for the child, right? So juvenile. So our program, the court order that mandates the child to do something, mandates the parent as well to do those things. If I tell a child you have to be at this program, most of those children don't have cars or other methods or means to get there. So the parent, you're required to make sure that your child goes. If it's an MST, a multisystemic therapy, that is for the parent and the child. That is how to teach you and your child how to coexist at home. Not here, not in detention, or not in the Department of Family and Children's Services, but at home. We're going to teach you how to parent your child, and child, we're going to teach you how to relate to your parent. So there's multisystemic, there's functional family therapy, there's IFE services, and all of those are mental health services to an extent, but it is for the family, and they are designed to keep that family intact and to keep that child out of trouble, but to teach the parent how to teach the child how to stay out of trouble.
The Gentleman of Style Show.